Out.
Meeting is being recorded.
All right, we're back with our weekly chat with Kevin McAleer about all kinds of literature, great and not so great, and anything in between. And right now we're doing a survey of Jack London. This is going to be part 5, I believe. We did one discussion was on his novels, and 3 of them were on 3 of his short story collections of the Klondike. And the first short story collection is called The Son of the Wolf. The next is called The God of His Fathers. The next is called Children of the Frost. And this will be the 4th and final Klondike set of stories called The Faith of Men. And how many stories we got there? We've got 8 stories in The Faith of Men. It's kind of interesting because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 9 stories in Son of the Wolf. We have 11 stories in The God of His Fathers, and we have 10 stories in Children of the Frost, and we have 8 stories in The Faith of Men. So we have 8, 9, 10, and 11 stories. I wonder if he planned.
Yeah, his production was decreasing. He was getting tired, distracted through all his fame and all the other little things he was doing at that time, which we'll talk about in the next episode about his life.
Okay, very good. And before we dive into the individual 8 stories of The Faith of Men, I just wanted to know what you thought of it in general, Kevin, the collection.
Superb. I thought you can see his progress. He's becoming a more mature writer. He had that in those first collections, you had the London power, right? But now there's a little more delicacy, I think, right? And that's the goal you want to achieve as a fiction writer. It's a balance between power and delicacy. We can elaborate that at some point, but I think our listeners know what I'm talking about. And I loved this collection. I thought it was great. Like I said in the last session, if you give me a short story collection and half the short stories are good, just good, then I consider that collection a success. Not everyone has. You can't hit a bases loaded homer every time. You know, it's just the way it is as a writer. It's hit and miss sometimes, and there are some misses here, I would argue, but there are 4 really beautiful stories, and I hope we can spend most of our time on those 4.
Let's start with those 4 then to make sure we get everything said about them that we need.
Well, we'll get them said. Why don't we just go through them as they're listed?
Okay.
So
Okay.
I would do that if you don't mind, because actually he gets better as the collection goes on. So those 4 or the 3 or 4 will be at the end, and then we can just spend as much time on them as we want after we've gotten the weaker stories out of the way.
Okay, great. And let me mention also about this collection that the first 2 stories are kind of humorous tales about this character named Stevens. I forget his full name. Something Stevens. Do you remember his full name? I think it's Matthew Stevens, or I don't have it turned to that page.
Yeah, Thomas Stevens.
Thomas Stevens is Thomas is your middle name and Stephen is your main character in your books. So he kind of has a similarity with your own names that you wrote.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to say about the first 2 stories, they're both comic stories about this Thomas Stevens guy. And you
the first one more so than the second, because the second's you get involved in some Machiavellian politics, and it's interesting, but I don't know. It's goofy. I mean, I like using that term. Yeah, I mean, London can be Mr. Serious sometimes, life and death, but sometimes he gets a little goofy,
But you said last time that you don't like when he tries to do the humorous thing. What about in the case?
Not near as much. It's like a fun little interlude, and that's not bad for a short story collection. But to kick off with those 2, which I would argue are among the weaker ones, they're among the weaker 4. To kick off with the collection, I think maybe not wise, because
Well,
I felt Because in both those stories, as we're reading, I read them, straight through from the first story to the end, from the first story to the last, the eighth. I was getting a little bit impatient, not with the relic of the Pliocene, but with the Hyperborean brew and the Machiavellian story.
And these are both with the character Thomas Stevens playing the lead comic figure.
Yeah.
Is that a character we meet in any other of his literature, or is it just these two short stories?
I can't recall.
Okay.
I can't recall.
Okay. Well, let's start with A Relic of the Pliocene. Tell us what you thought. Just give us a brief summary of the story and tell us your thoughts about it.
Well, that's fun. Okay, we kick off the collection with a light story, and that's fine. I just didn't like one right after the other. It's about a guy who he's a teller of tall tales, and they're all very apocryphal. You don't know whether or how much is true, but he's a spinner of yarns, and he's entertaining that way. And he's telling this story about how one time he was up there in the north, and it was the summer, so it wasn't snow time. And he ran across a mammoth, a woolly mammoth, I guess.
Yeah.
And the conversation gets started because he shows the fellow at the campfire to whom he's relating this story, to whom he will relate the story. He says, "Look at these boots. What do you think of those boots? What kind of animal provided the skin and the hair for those boots?" And then he goes on to tell the story about how he got them by killing a woolly mammoth, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
Or a mastodon. Is it a mammoth? Okay.
It's a mammoth, yeah.
Yeah. And he tells the story how he came across this thing.
And they're supposed to be extinct.
They're supposed to be extinct is the point, right? I think since 10,000 years they've been extinct. I mean, not
however long.
Not like the Brontosaurus or something, but recently they've died out, as it were. And it's kind of funny, it's fiction, so you don't have to.
Well, he's claiming that he killed the last of the mammoths. This is the very first one.
As if he would know.
As if you would know, right?
But it starts out kind of funny because he's sitting there and he's got this new these puppies. His dog, one of his dogs, has given birth to 6 or 7 puppies, and he's sitting there, enjoying them, and all of a sudden this big foot comes and just squashes the little puppies, and he's ticked off because actually these puppies were the result of a little bit of breeding on his part, and he thought they were a rare breed, and so it wasn't just love of his little puppies. So he's ticked off, and he just lights out after this mastodon, this mammoth that has come stomping into his camp, and he just lights off after it, and he tells the story how he actually runs it to ground and kills it. It's that's not the most interesting part, I think, but
okay.
He basically runs it off its feet. And that's the tale, that's it. That's all there is to say.
Okay. It's a nice, fun little way to start short story collection. But then he gets into kind of the humorous vein as well in the second story, A Hyperborean Brew, also featuring the same character of Thomas Stevens. What did you think of that story, Kevin?
Like I said, I was a little bit impatient with it. I don't know why. Maybe it's my own problem.
It's kind of a longer story.
Yeah, maybe that's it. I've always said that London's best when he's short, in his short stories.
Yeah.
When he starts stretching out his short stories, they tend to be the ones I don't necessarily care for. With one exception, with one very prominent exception, which is Odyssey of the North.
Okay, because this story has 14 pages in my book. The first story we just mentioned has 7 pages, and this one has 14. So he does kind of keep it going for a while.
Which is a long short story.
It is kind of, he has some longish short stories once in a while, yeah.
Yeah, because it's perfectly legitimate. But the book that we're reading the same book. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very small type, largest pages. So, by other pages standards, it would be like maybe 25 pages or something. So it's a long, short story.
Good point.
But whatever.
Can you tell us what it's about? Hyperborean. What are we talking about here? A hyperborean.
Hyperborean brew is this hooch, as London calls it, this alcohol that he brews up there in the Arctic Circle, or up there where the Indians have hardly seen a white man, if at all. He's the first, it would seem, or one of the first. And he brews this hooch, and they like it, and he starts to trade for for the privilege of trying his hooch out. The Indians bring him all these furs and other commodities, and he makes himself a rather wealthy man in the village. And then there's a rivalry with the shaman, medicine man, who wants the recipe to the hooch. And at some point he gets it, but then this Stevens guy sells him flour to make the hooch that doesn't have that has soda in it, I think is what he does. He puts soda in it, which for some reason it doesn't allow it to ferment. So he plays the medicine man a trick. And so so the medicine man's offering all these people the hooch, and they're like, "What? This isn't like Stevens' hooch. Hey, forget it. Yeah, I'll go back to Stevens." And then Stevens has a factotum. I forget his name, but he's an Indian factotum he has, and he sort of gets involved in the whole thing. And it finally pans out that there's tricks played on both sides. Mostly Stevens is the trickster, and Stevens emerges top dog, and the factotum goes back to being his factotum. He had pretensions to become the chieftain of the village.
Okay.
And that's it. And so, yeah, you can even tell how, as I'm telling it, I'm not too enthused about the whole thing, but whatever. It's okay,
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
I saw elements of Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court there.
Yeah.
And also I saw elements of these two guys trying to gain power over this tribe, playing on their ignorance, and going at it as rivals. There's a lot of The Man Who Would Be King from Rudyard Kipling in this, if you're familiar with those two guys going into the wilds of Afghanistan and trying to take control of the system there.
Which I'm sure London read.
He must have. He loved Kipling.
He loved Kipling. He read everything he wrote. And if I'm not mistaken, The Man Who Will Be King was written before London came out with this short story.
I see so much influence of Mark Twain and Rudyard Kipling throughout London. It's funny because I never did see any of that influence when I learned about London in grade school and high school and whatnot, because all we got was White Fang, and we got we got to The Call of the Wild, To Build a Fire. All we got was the heavy duty, Klondike serious stories. But
right.
He has a more playful side to him that we usually don't hear about in school.
Oh, indeed. And we're also given to understand that he was this force of nature that sort of emerged ex nihilo, and primarily through his Klondike stories. He was the man who invented the Klondike story, essentially. And this is who he had no, and so you're given to understand that he had no influences, that he just, came up with this genre. He was this, great, tour de force.
Sui generis force.
Right, but he was doing his reading, and as again we'll talk about later in more detail perhaps, but he was a great reader. He was always reading, always.
You can tell he has a lot of influences, but interestingly, he has a lot of influences. I've mentioned the influence of Edgar Allan Poe in the story
Right.
In a Far Country and To Build a Fire, this existential aspect of a gradual terror and
Yeah.
reality coming to an end. But despite his many influences, he's able to really maintain his own voice still. He doesn't go too far with inculcating these influences to such an
No,
extent that he loses his own voice. He still keeps that London tone to him.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No
Okay,
question.
Kevin. So the next story is would you call it the eponymous Faith of Men? When I say that, I mean that's the name of this collection as a whole, the Faith of Men, and then he has a story called the Faith of Men. What about that story? Any thoughts on that one?
I loved it. And this is again a story about white men in the North and how do you find a bride? And again, we're juxtaposing the white woman from civilization with from American civilization, we'll put it that way, with the tough, salt of the earth Indian woman. And this is a great story because it's sort of a cross between the Great Interrogation, which we read earlier, where this white woman comes up to the North to get back this lost love of hers, but he's with an Indian woman and he decides to stay with her. And it's a cross between another story we'll talk about at the end, because it's the last story. It's called the story of Jis Ook. So we'll leave that story for later. I won't go into that. But sort of a cross. This one here, the Faith of Men, sort of a cross between Jis Ook and the Great Interrogation. So what's it about? It's about two guys. They got a claim. They're making a lot of money through their gold prospecting up there. And at a certain point, one of them goes down to the States. Turns out to be San Francisco where he goes. A lot of these guys, when they go back to America, they're going back to San Francisco. No coincidence. That's where Jack London is from. Okay, Oakland, but he knows the area. San Francisco, knows the Bay Area. So he's always sending them back to America. You can sort of read between the lines. It's always San Francisco if he doesn't even say it explicitly. And in this case, he does. And this one partner in the prospecting project, he goes back to San Francisco to bring back his partner's intended. I guess they've been betrothed or they have an understanding, something like that. And he's going to get her and bring her back, right? Now, why doesn't this fellow do it himself? Well, they shake for it, as they say. They had this is what you do in a bar, right? You have like dice and you shake for it to see who buys the drinks. And they shook for it, and this guy won or lost, I don't know. But anyway, it's decided through the shaking of the dice, through sheer luck, that the partner should go down to get the girl and bring her back up to this fellow to whom she has been promised. And then what happens is, it takes a long time, right? You're going by dog sled, by ship. It takes a long time to get down there. But it was taking even longer than it should have. And this guy's getting curious, what's going on down there? And then he starts getting letters from his partner saying what a wonderful girl this guy has. Oh, she's just beautiful. She's, exquisite. And he's thinking, yeah, well, nothing's happening between those two. And then he reads in a paper, I think it's a San Francisco paper or a Portland paper maybe, or a Seattle paper.
I believe it's the Portland paper.
It's a Portland paper. He reads the banns of marriage, that this guy's marrying his girl. So he's a little ticked. And then, but he thinks, well, man, I think there's sort of like a moment where he thinks, well, who knows what's going on here. But But then he reads another report of it, and then that's the Seattle paper. And he said, okay, good, done deal, forget it. I'm going to forget her, forget him, whatever. And he marries an Indian girl. I mean, he's very decisive about it. He gets all his furs and everything else, and he goes to the village and he says, hey, chief, look at this. What do you say? I'd like to marry your daughter. Chief goes, yeah, take daughter, go. So they become man and wife, right? Or common law wife, I don't know, right? Anyway,
Either way.
They're together as man and wife.
Hmm.
Well, then they make a life for themselves, and he's a rich prospector. This friend of his has still not come back, has not communicated with him. And one fine day, this fellow and his Indian wife, they're on their dog sleigh. They're with their dog sleigh, and they're heading out to a white man's place, who also has an Indian wife, I think, or maybe it's not an Indian wife. But anyway, the wife, his woman, is having a child, and this Indian woman is a midwife, among her many other practical skills. And so they're heading out there, when all of a sudden they see in the distance this other dog sled coming their way. Well, who should it be but this partner of his and the woman he wanted to marry, and another woman, namely this woman whom he wanted to marry's sister. All right, you got that, everyone? Okay. So they meet there in the middle of nowhere, right, in the snow. Nice coincidence. And it's touchy, because here we go. What's he going to do? Because what happens is, how it shakes down is that the newspapers got it wrong. His partner didn't marry his intended, his partner married her sister. They just got it twisted around for whatever reason. And, of course, you couldn't communicate with the guy too readily, I mean, I guess you could have, but anyway, so this tragic misprint has led to this situation. And then I don't know. Anyway, you're thinking, okay, what's going to happen now? What happens is he just says, well, I'm sorry, it's too late. There's a nice little exchange there. He says, his partner says, what is that squaw doing on your sled? And then the fellow says, she is my squaw, Mrs. Pentfield, if you please. That's a nice passage, I think. And then they discuss the whole problem, how it occurred, and da-da-da-da-da. And then this fellow just says, well, I read again, I'm very sorry. I did not dream it. I thought you had married Corey. Now he's speaking to his intended. Her name's Mabel, I think. That is Mrs. Pentfield sitting on the sled over there. And it ends with, well, the woman, his intended, she's just agog. She almost faints dead away. They have to kind of prop her up. And then this guy says, well, can't stop here all day with Pete's baby waiting. And then he mush, and they go off. Just leave them standing there aghast. And he says over his shoulder as they're riding away, oh, I say, Corey, to his partner, you'd better occupy the old cabin. It's not been used for some time. I've built a new one on the hill. The new one on the hill is for him and his wife. And I thought that was very touching. He sticks with the Indian girl.
Good story. Good story.
Yeah, I loved it. I always, I'm a soft touch for those stories where you pick the maybe the less spectacular woman, namely the Indian woman, but a woman who's, probably at least as good a woman, if not better, and will stand by you through thick and thin. I
Yeah.
like that.
Nice
Yeah.
story. I agree with you on that. All right. Very good explanation. Very colorful explanation. Part of the lure of these videos is your wonderful descriptions of these.
I don't, maybe, but they're not as.
I'm getting the kind of Garrison Keillor vibe from you when you explain all these wonderful little anecdotal stories.
Well, I wish I could tell it more fluently, but they all
Hey,
kind of mix into each other.
You know what? Garrison Keillor was talking from a script, so don't feel so bad in the comparison.
All right. I'm
You're
winging
just,
it, as you
you're
could all
just
tell.
doing it extemporaneously, and you're doing it well. Okay, the next story is called Too Much Gold.
It's another comical one. And so obviously I liked it less than the others. It's okay. I thought this was actually maybe the weakest of the stories of all of them. It's about a couple prospectors, and they go into 40 Mile is the town, and it's abandoned. And they're in the middle of summer because there's all these mosquitoes everywhere. I mean, mosquitoes. London mentions this a lot in various stories about the mosquitoes. They're everywhere.
Yeah, that's brutal.
That's brutal, and they're flying around your face, and you put mud on your face to keep them off. Yeah. That's what they had back then. They put mud. They didn't have sunscreen or mosquito repellent or whatever. Murder. And so they're going in there. It's summer. They're on the river, and they go in there, and it's abandoned 40 Mile. And they go to the bar, the saloon. Saloon keeper knows everything. He's the gossip. He knows what's going on. He says, "Hey, well, there's a big strike up in Dawson." This is early on in the gold rush. 1896, I think it was. Summer of 96, he in fact says. And he said, "There's a big strike in Dawson. And Dawson would become the center of or at least the metropolitan center of the gold rush later on when it got into full swing. You got to go up there and stake a claim." And they go up there, and there's hardly any land more to stake a claim. They find a claim, they stake it. Turns out to not be that profitable. They get is it a Swede again? They get some Swedish guy.
Another Swede.
Another big oafish kind of Swedish guy, as London describes him. And get him drunk, and he signs the papers to take over their claim, right? And they overcharge him for it, of course. And then they go off laughing. They come back several months later for whatever reason, going through the town. They see this guy on the claim, and he's struck it rich. That's the story.
Okay. And the name of the Swede, I think it's something like, what's the name of the Swede? Anne Henderson. It seemed to me to be a pun on the name Hans Christian Andersen.
Okay.
If you can find the name, I'm wondering if he was. Oh, here it is. Yeah, Ans Henderson, ANS, and then Henderson. So I thought he's reversing the initial letters of the name Hans Christian Andersen. Hans Andersen becomes Ans Henderson. I wonder
so now we know he also read Hans Christian Andersen.
Possibly, or at least he heard the name as a name from the Scandinavian, and he employed it here in a way that you switched the letters. Possibly, I don't know.
No, I'm sure he did, because there's a certain fairy tale quality to some of his.
Very well said. Yeah, there is a
particularly the relic of the Pliocene, a Hyperborean brew. This, in a way, a fairy tale with little moral to the story.
Little tongue-in-cheek nod to Hans Christian Andersen with Anne's.
Maybe. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah, but you're
okay. Very well described. Okay, Kev. The next story after that is. Here we go. Here's one of the big ones that I know you love. You mentioned it in an earlier chat. In our first short story chat, we were covering just basically all the short stories, and this was one that you chose for special mention in our first survey. Now that we are more specifically within the Faith of Men anthology, give us your full view of the 1,000 Dozen.
Well, I did actually adumbrate it more than adequately, I think, before, but I will briefly go over it again.
Okay.
This is a
But, but, but
classic.
Kev, but Kev, I'd like you to more thoroughly go over it for those who didn't see that video, or,
Okay,
give us the
1,000
full
dozen.
description.
1,000 dozen. This comes under the heading of uh, London's scorn for feckless white men in the Klondike. Now, there's a qualifier to this. This man is feckless insofar as he overestimates, or he rather, excuse me, he underestimates the the trials he will undergo in the North with his grand project, which is to bring up 1,000 dozen eggs to this region where they are dying for this sort of food. You know, you can only eat walrus meat or caribou meat for so long. You want something else, and there's famine is often threatening or striking even, and so just to go up there with this kind of commodity, he thinks it's going to make him not a wealthy man, but he's going to make a real killing off of it. And from the beginning, as you and I discussed, just reading the title and getting into the first few sentences, you're like, you're going to transport 1,000 dozen eggs? Aren't they rather fragile? And okay, you're going to pack them in a certain way, but I mean, come on. And then say they survive the trip, don't eggs go bad? I mean, so these two thoughts in your mind, just as he lays out the project of this fellow, London laying out the project. And the interesting thing is, what's so apparent to the reader, London never mentions those two things. Never.
Well,
For
what
one
two
reason.
things?
How fragile these eggs must be, and how you have to pack them in a certain way, and then the fact that they might go bad. Well, cut to the chase, I suppose. He keeps that aspect of it from us, maybe realizing we're going to think it for ourselves. We don't need any assistance here. Thank you very much. But after just wearing himself to a frazzle, this fellow with his 1,000 dozen eggs, and then getting them only so far, and then winter sets in, and he has to go back to America to get another loan from the bank, and he's just running himself into the ground. He's lost weight. He doesn't even shave. He's got a beard. Just neglects his hygiene and appearance. When he finally gets them, I guess it's Dawson, I forget, but some city where there's famine afoot. Yeah, he starts selling them, and he's selling them for more he could have possibly imagined. But then it turns out the eggs, yeah, they've gone bad in the meantime, right? Who'd have thunk? Well, I thought that like in the first three sentences. And you're thinking that throughout, actually, you know. So it's not even a spoiler for the people who haven't read the story. It's like you're thinking that. It's like, aren't these things going to go bad? But London never mentions that. I mean, there's he's got a little bit of explaining to do, Mr. London, why he didn't maybe think that this would be the first thing to occur to the reader. Like, this is a really, at least explaining to us how you're going to keep the eggs good. But I think he didn't want to give the game away. He didn't want to even touch upon that.
Right. Do you think you've told me before that part of the quality of a short story is it has to be believable, and you didn't like that Hemingway story, Indian Camp, because you
Yeah.
found the premise too hard to believe that this guy
Yes.
would actually kill himself just because his squaw was experiencing these pretty nasty labor pains. Do you think this qualifies as an unbelievable short story, therefore diminished in quality?
Well, probably not, because it probably was the case that guys brought up eggs there and they were able to sell them. I don't
Well,
know.
it does say in this story that as soon as the guy gets up there, he saw two competitors also bringing eggs. So apparently it was a common thing. And as
Right.
far as keeping them cool, Alaska's like a giant refrigerator. So you can do
Yeah, but
that.
he was also traveling with them through the summer heat and everything. That's why that's why he got frozen in the winter, and he couldn't go any further, and he had to go back to the States to get another bank loan.
And should we tell the audience what our huge audience, I say that facetiously, yeah. We don't have such a huge audience list, but should we let whoever's watching this know what happens at the end of the story? It's quite interesting.
Of course,
Yeah.
Rob, we're telling the ends to every story. Yeah, this guy, he just, yeah, when it turns out that the eggs are bad, and the eggs that he has sold, the initial sales he made, he goes back into a little hut he found immediately, and he starts going through the eggs. He starts cutting them open. See, is this batch good? Maybe this batch. No, they're all rotten. And he's in his little hut and just doing this, just intently, mechanically. He's just drained of all emotion. It seems he's just in disbelief, in shock, and just going through this. And the eggs are lying all over the place. And then some guy comes in, knocks on the door, and he goes, "Oh, what is that smell? It's awful. Oh, it's these eggs." And he says, "Well, good. It doesn't matter that they're all destroyed because I want to buy them for my dogs. It's good dog food. The dogs will eat it. That's fine." And the guy goes, "Get out of here. Get out of here." Yeah. Because he wanted to buy them at a very cut rate.
Yeah.
And this guy wasn't willing to sell them at he was so disheartened at that point. He wasn't even willing to sell them for like $200 to get at least $200. Anyway, he had another plan in mind. The guy leaves. Guy fashions a noose from a rope, hangs himself.
Is that a believable ending? I mean, would a person really hang himself and not go for the lower rate on his eggs and at least salvage some dinero? And
that's where the realism kicks in for me.
Okay.
Because this is a story about a man who's in the grip of a self-destructive obsession.
And as you mentioned, London says he was the man of the one idea. So I guess it's basically telling us that when a man puts all his eggs in one basket, so to speak,
yes,
he's liable to knock himself off if that one idea doesn't work.
Oh, sure, I could completely relate to that.
Interesting.
Not that I've ever had just one idea where, if it didn't come through, I would knock myself off. But there have been certain things in my life where I would have considered dying to try and realize this goal. You know what I mean? Not knocking myself off, but putting myself at risk, in fact, my physical existence to achieve this goal. I think you can too. So that's very believable.
Okay.
And as to the eggs, again, I mean, I think the first thing I'm going to do once we're done here, I'm going to Google eggs in the Klondike, 1,000 dozen, believable or what, I'll find that out. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's again about this, this tragedy. It could be anything. It could be the one idea of anything.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden it goes up in a puff of smoke. And what do you have now? You have nothing because you, as you say, put all your eggs in one basket. You can't fall back on anything.
All right.
So you say, well, what's the point of living? That's it.
It does make sense on that level, definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, great story.
All right, wonderful. Okay, next story, the marriage of Leet, L-I-T-L-I-T, Leet, I guess is the way we say it.
Probably. Okay, this is again one of the kind of the lighter stories. It's about a white man, and he basically buys the daughter of the chief because she's very comely, and he wants to make her his wife. And he gives the chief, so many skins and rifles, bottles of whiskey, and at a certain point, the chief thinks, "Hey, I should have gotten more out of this guy. Yeah, he got a better deal. My daughter's great. Everyone thinks she's a real beauty, and she's a wonderful girl in other respects. Hey, this was a clean steal. I gotta get some of my own back." So he tells his daughter, "Look, I'm gonna come by some night, and I'm gonna what? He's gonna make some bird sounds. It was a raven or something. I forget. They make some bird sounds, and they said, when I make
It
those
is a
sounds,
raven. Yeah.
you come out, and you come with me. And then in order for him to get you back, he's going to have to give me some more goods, more valuables. Well, she's very happy with this guy, this white guy. And so the chief comes by on several nights and does his, caw, caw, whatever he does. She hears him, but she's not going to go anywhere. The problem is, though, she can't like tell him to his face, because obedience is one of the virtues, apparently, of an Indian daughter. You obey your father, despite the fact that you might have now a husband. She doesn't do it. She's very happy. And one of the things that London will talk about in other stories, as he mentions here, is how Indian women seem, at least in his fictional world, Indian women seem to be rather pleased with white husbands because they don't treat them as badly as Indians treat their wives. That's London. That's London. And so this seems to be the case. So she's living, she has a nice bed. She's not on the trail. She's not having to break trail through the snow, that kind of stuff. Because this guy's rich, right? He's one of these rich prospector types. I think he's a prospector. Anyway. So, yeah, so we have a little showdown between the father and the husband, and basically the husband throws him out on his ear, and I think at some point, does the father actually get some more goods from the husband? I don't know, but anyway, Leet stays with her husband, and they all lived happily ever after. A light little tale, and it's okay.
Okay. Very well described. The next one is bâtard, which is the French word for bastard, I believe.
Yeah.
We're dealing with a Frenchman named Black Leclerc, the owner of bâtard.
Yeah, you and I always smile with those names, Black Leclerc, beautiful.
and even bâtard is quite a name for a dog.
Well, you have to remember that London himself was a bastard, so to speak. He was born out of wedlock, and we'll talk about that next time we talk about his life. But right now, very briefly, he was born out of wedlock, and he was very conscious of this fact, apparently, and it sort of haunted him, as you could understand it would someone.
I can understand. So that's interesting. He would use that as not only as the name of the dog, but the name of the title of the book or story, I should say, bâtard.
Yeah,
so
but
tell us what it's about.
Well, I love this story. I read it when I was very young for the first time. This is one of the first stories I read when I was first encountering London, when our father, would give me these books that he had read as a teenager or a young man, apparently not as young as I was, like 9 or 10. He would give me these things, and I remember reading it about that age, and understanding it and being blown away by it even then. Yeah.
It is quite a shocking story.
It's very shocking. And it's about we've heard of love-hate relationships. Well, this is a hate-hate relationship.
Absolutely.
The dog hates the owner hates the dog. Well, and London addresses this, and they both torment each other. One of the ways that Black Leclerc torments bâtard is that he will start singing, because the dog apparently can't stand singing and will start going, woo, 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 in torment, start howling at the moon. And he'll whack it around and do it physical harm. And the dog tries to kill Black Leclerc at some point in his sleep, tries to bite his throat and sink his fangs into his jugular, but Black Leclerc wakes up in time, and well, you're going to wake up right away, I guess. You got a dog's fangs in your jugular, and he survives. And the whole time you're thinking, well, wait a second, can't a dog just run away? Why doesn't the dog run away? Because he's not always on the leash. And can't the owner just, even in the worst case scenario, just kill the dog? Why doesn't any of this happen? London addresses this. He explains it. And a lot of it, so he imputes sort of human feelings to the dog, little anthropomorphization going on here, which is London's hallmark, of course, which is why we love him, his dog stories and that sort of thing. He says the dog had a deep visceral hatred. Dogs can feel hate of this man, Black Leclerc. And Black Leclerc, it was hate, but there was an admixture of his own personal honor, because he wanted to break the dog. He wanted to have Batar come crawling to him and whimpering, but Batar wants none of that. Batar always, when he gets whacked around or tormented in whatever way, there's always a snarl to his lip. Yeah, he's not gonna knuckle under to this guy. So they're both very strong characters. You don't know who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist. Like I say, it's a hate story. And it ends beautifully. It's a beautifully poetic ending. Truly, I think you can use the term poetic. What happens is that Black Leclerc, who's not well loved in the region, he's sort of a dicey character, not only vis-a-vis dogs, but his fellow humans. Anyway, they think that he has committed a murder. And they, as you had back then, if a Mountie was not in the area, then you would just take justice into your own hands, and they get up a hanging party. And they decide that he has killed a couple Indians, I guess, in cold blood. And they're about ready to hang him, and they stand him on a crate, and they got the noose around him, and it's so tight that he's just standing on his tiptoes almost. And here's where London has this great description of how the mosquitoes were driving him nuts, because he's had his hands tied behind his back, and he's kept having to the mosquitoes off of his face with this noose around his neck. You can imagine that, right? And at one point they get news that, wait, no, Black Leclerc, he's innocent. No. And they get some other evidence to the contrary. And then they all take off to, get the other guys who are responsible or whatever. And they all just forget about Black Leclerc. He's standing on the crate with a noose around his neck. And Black Leclerc says, "Hey, wait, what about me?" They go, you could just stand there for a while. You could, contemplate your sinful life, and you can maybe, repent and be a better man for it, that sort of thing. So they just leave him there standing on the crate. Everyone's gone, except Batar. He's there. And Batar knows exactly what's going on. He has sussed out the situation. He knows how he's going to get this guy. And what he does at a certain point, well, see, the thing is, what London builds the tension, because Batar, I misspoke. Batar is asleep. Ostensibly, he's asleep, right? We don't know if he's feigning sleep, but he's there. And Black Leclerc's just sitting and looking at him, hoping he's not going to wake up, because he knows that Batar's going to maybe do something that's not going to be very pleasant. And he does. He slowly kind of, as London describes, he sort of wakes up slowly, kind of yawns, and kind of
just casually.
It's like Batar's playing with him, Oh, what's this? Yeah. And that's okay. So what? Cut a long story short, what happens is that he rushes the crate. He knows how to do this. He rushes it, tries to push it away with his paws, like the Huskies would do, breaking ice, And this doesn't quite work, so he really rushes it, and it's wobbling. You can imagine Leclerc, and Leclerc's talking the whole time. He's going, "Hey, wait, what are you doing?" And then we cut to the next scene, and it's seen from the hanging parties, or the would-be hanging parties, approach, and they see this thing swinging like a pendulum, and it's Black Leclerc hanging from the tree with Batar still clinging to him with his jaws and creating this pendular motion. And even after then they shoot Batar, but still they can't wrench his jaws from Black Leclerc. It's beautiful. I love it.
A combination of the Black Cat and the Pit and the Pendulum of Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah. If any further proof is needed that he read and loved Poe, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's see. At the end, it does. One thing I wanted to mention. Did it really say he was swinging like a pendulum? I might have missed that.
I'll look it up. I
wanna make
believe.
sure.
Yeah. I strongly believe.
Oh, yeah. Here it is. 15 minutes later, Slackwater Charlie and Webster Shaw, returning, caught a glimpse of a ghostly pendulum swinging back and forth in the dim light. As they hurriedly drew in closer, they made out the man's inert body and a live thing that clung to it and shook and worried and gave to it the swaying motion. All right, there's your pendulum. Yep.
Yeah.
Hi-ya, Chook, you spawn of hell, yelled Webster Shaw. But Batard glared at him and snarled threateningly without loosing his jaws. Slackwater Charlie got out his revolver, but his hand was shaking, as with a chill, and he fumbled. Here, you take it, he said, passing the weapon over. Webster Shaw laughed shortly, drew a sight between the gleaming eyes, and pressed the trigger. Batard's body twitched with the shock, threshed the ground spasmodically for a moment, and went suddenly limp, but his teeth still held fast locked.
Classic London. Classic Jack London. If you had to read one dog story, I'd say read that one. Because it's the anti-dog story, and he's famous for White Fang and Call of the Wild. You rarely hear people talk about Batar. It gets lost in the anthropomorphic dog story discussion. But that's a beautiful one.
Kevin, before we move on to our final story, you did mention in a previous chat of ours on these video sessions that you love the dialect of Black Leclerc, the French Klondike dialect. Do you have any samples of that? I have one right here. Here's a picture of Batard, of Black Leclerc being sent to the gallows with Batard in the background. And it says beneath in the caption, it says, a little favor. First you hang him, and then you hang me.
I forgot that part. Right. Actually, that's another lovely element of it. He wants the dog to be hung with him. And in fact, Leclerc is an interesting character in and of himself. We've been sort of talking about the relationship between him and this dog, but he's an interesting character. After it's clear that he's not going to be able to escape his fate, he's rather resigned. He's rather cool about it. He's like, I guess I can't escape this, but just do me one favor. You hang this dog with me, okay? Just do me that one thing. Great presence.
And he said he wants the dog hung first.
He wants the dog hung first. Well, they don't do it, do they? Or they're going to do it? I forget. Are they intending to do it? Or are they just thinking?
I'm not sure on that point. But the interesting thing is he doesn't really mind losing his life, but he wants to make sure he gets to see the hanging of his dog first.
Right.
And that's an interesting aspect of his character.
Well, it's like the 1,000 dozen almost. It's this magnificent obsession.
Yeah.
Well.
All right. Very good survey of Batard. Let's, I wanted to know if you had any other samples of the wonderful French dialect in there.
It's all over the place.
Give us a couple samples.
I'll just give one. Okay.
I've got a couple.
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, audience. This is very boring for you.
Yeah, I got a couple.
All right.
Hey, what I say, that the one for sure, I know, I speak true. Hey, monsieur, I like very much to see the phone.
Right. Yeah, the fun being the hanging of Batar, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
He-
the fun being to see him hang.
Yeah, and then this is great. This is like the little passage I was alluding to, where London really builds the tension and plays it out. He said, so Batar is rousing himself. He did not rouse them, but a few minutes later, he got up slowly and lazily, stretched, and looked carefully about him. Sacre dame, said Leclerc under his breath.
Oh boy.
Assured that no one was in sight or hearing, Batar sat down, curled his upper lip almost into a smile, looked up at Leclerc and licked his chops. I see my finish, the man said, and laughed sardonically aloud. So that's you kind of like Black Leclerc. He's a real man, you know. He's facing his demise almost in style. I would argue in style, you know, laughing. Here it is. I knew it had to. It was him or me, and it looks like it's going to be me. You know, one of those things.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Beautiful.
I'm sure.
Don't you agree? It's a
Well, part of the lure of that story is not only this morbid relationship between man and dog, but the portrayal of the character of Leclerc and his dialect. That really adds to the story.
and I'll say one last thing about it. What I find interesting is that, as opposed to another classic animal story where the animal is a representation of something that is onerous, is Moby Dick. This white nothingness, this amoral creature.
Yes.
I think that's Melville's take on it. That not Ahab's, of course, but that Moby Dick, he's just a poor innocent creature that happened to cross paths with this Ahab guy, and now this Ahab guy, another magnificent obsession. A lot of great stories, by the way, are about obsession. A lot of great novels in literature. Yeah. Count of Monte Cristo, Great Gatsby. We can go down the list. And here in Batar, London is ascribing wickedness to a dog.
Interesting.
He's ascribing real feelings of hostility and malice to a creature that most people would just say, well, it's an amoral creature. They don't have a soul like us. They don't have that. That's not on their scale of being. But he's doing this. He's doing this.
Comparison. Well, and I think Poe describes the same thing in The Black Cat to the feline. But it's an interesting point you make about the Moby Dick. This is like Moby Dick in miniature. You know, you got a little dog here who's going to be just as amoral, if not immoral, as that white whale. Okay.
Well, Tim, that's the difference. See, Moby Dick, is, in my reading of it, is that it is this amoral symbol of nature. That nature is neither good nor bad; it just is. Whereas London is ascribing real human.
Well, Kev, we'll have to do a whole session on Moby Dick at one point, but I will say I think Melville ascribes some immoral evil to the whale. But you know, it's neither. I'm not really certain. Okay. We could do that another time.
Then if so, then London is in a proud literary tradition.
There you go. If so being the key phrase. We'll talk more on Moby Dick at another point. We got to get to that soon. Last tale of the faith of men, the story of Geese Ook. We only have about 5 minutes to do.
Well, this might take 6. This is my favorite. This is my favorite story.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, it's again. This is where I mentioned it in terms of the faith of men. I said the faith of men is sort of a cross between the Great Interrogation, which we talked about a couple sessions before, and Geese Ook. Now, this is the story of Geese Ook. Great story. It's about a man who marries a white man up in the north, and he marries an Indian woman. And at a certain point, and he strikes it rich. He's a wealthy prospector. And at a certain point, he has to go to America, again, San Francisco, to take care of some business. I forget exactly what it was, but he has to go, in the cause of something that will not allow him to stay put. And he leaves his wife, puts her in charge of things, and he says he's going to come back before the snow flies. This is the summer. Well, he doesn't come back before the snow flies. And everyone's telling Jis Uk, the name of the Indian girl, that, oh, he's met another woman. Forget him. He's done. He's toast. He's not coming back. And she's not having any of it. She laughs at them. She's truly in love with him. She thinks that he's truly in love with her. And he is, actually. London makes that very clear, that this man is deeply in love with this, or maybe not deeply in love is the term, but he says he's deeply committed to this Indian woman. Well, yes, in fact, he had met another woman, a white woman in San Francisco, from an affluent family. And, maybe a year or two has passed, maybe 3. And she finally gets wind of this, and she herself has to take it on board. And what she does then is that she sets off for San Francisco. She's going to go back and get her man. And I think that's just, that whole idea is beautiful, right? Not giving up. And she takes her young son, who is this white man's son, that she was pregnant with this son before he left, right? Which I think he was not quite aware of, because she has the kid like 7 or 8 months later, after he's something like that. Maybe he's aware of it. I don't think so, though. Anyway, she tracks him down in this beautiful house, probably on Nob Hill in San Francisco, knocks on the door, is let in by some Asian manservant, goes into the living rooms. It's amazing what this wealth she sees all before her. And the guy's not there, but the wife is. And she comes in, and the woman, she brings a great deal of feminine sensibility to how she susses out the woman. Now this Jis Hook is apparently quite attractive physically. But then she sees this white woman who's ethereal, but at the same time has this certain strength about her, iron in her bones, not just some weak little white woman that she had been used to seeing up there oftentimes. Wow. She said, oh, this woman's got some steel in her bones. And the woman says, oh, how nice. You used to know Neil, is his name, Neil? You used to know Neil up there? And she goes, she doesn't let on that they were a couple. She doesn't let on, because she knows she's out of her league at this point. She knows that she's not going to win this guy back. This woman, she's impressed by this woman. She's quite impressed by this woman in the whole setting. And she says, yes, I knew him. And actually, this Jis Uk can speak pretty good English. She had learned pretty good English in the meantime. It's not just pidgin. But she reverts to the pidgin. In other words, she's playing the role she thinks that is expected of her. And she doesn't want to shock this woman or make her think things that might ruin the marriage. In other words, she's on the side of her man, even in this deplorable instance where she has been betrayed. She still doesn't want to ruin things for him. That's how much she loves him and is committed to him. And the great example, and I'll end with this, is that they have a daughter in the meantime. That is the white man and the white woman. They have a daughter, and the daughter comes in and starts playing with the little boy, because he has the little boy by the hand, right? The son of this white guy. And they start playing. And then at a certain point, the man comes. He comes in. And he knows what's up. And but he doesn't spill the beans either. You know, he keeps it quiet that they had been together as a couple. And at a certain point, the white woman asks the little boy, "Oh, what is your name?" The young savage flashed his quick eyes upon her and dwelt over her for a space, seeking out, as it were, the motive beneath the question. "Neil," he answered deliberately, when the scrutiny had satisfied him. So he has the same name as his father. Now, this is going to cause the white woman to ask questions. She's no dumb bunny. She can put two to two together, no matter how they're trying to pull the wool over her eyes. So here's where Jeek does her great act of self-sacrifice. So he says Neil. So he says Neil, the kid, and before the white woman or Neil, the father, can respond, she says, "Injun talk." Jees Ook interposed, glibly manufacturing languages on the spur of the moment. "Him Injun talk. Neil. All the same. Cracker. Him baby. Him like cracker. Him cry for cracker. Him say Neil, Neil. All time him say Neil. Then I say that name. So name all time Neil. Never did sound," here's London the narrator, "never did sound more blessed fall upon Neil Bonner's ear than that lie from Jees Ook's lips." And that's the high point of the story. That's her great act of self-sacrifice.
Yep.
That she keeps the secret for herself and for Neil. But it's not as if he's not grateful. She goes back, and then he's sending her money, lots of money every year to maintain her household. She eventually founds a school, I think, of some sort,
mission school.
like a missionary school. Yeah, and she sends
it's well endowed by some wealthy patron in San Francisco.
Right. And she sends her little boy to some elite college in America. I guess he stays there, he makes a career for himself. Well, she's still up there, with her students. I guess she's got it's like a girls' school, I think she founds, and she's one of the teachers. Anyway, and it ends this way. The school. It is neither Protestant nor Catholic. This school in the house built by Neil Bonner, white man, for Jees Ook, his wife. But the missionaries of all the sects look upon it with equal favor. The latch string is always out, and tired prospectors and trail-weary men turn aside from the flowing river or frozen trail to rest there for a space and be warmed by her fire. So she has a very good reputation, wide and broad. And down in the States, Kitty Bonner, this is the white woman he married, Kitty Bonner is pleased at the interest her husband takes in Alaskan education and the large sums he devotes to that purpose. And though she often smiles and chaffs, deep down and secretly, she is but the prouder of him. So I love this story. I think it's almost my favorite story of all the four anthologies. And we end with a bang. We end with a bang, in my view.
Yeah.
And especially with Batar as the penultimate story. So I like that.
Okay, would you say The Faith of Men is the best of the four anthologies of the Klondike, or does it go tied to the runner with the first one, Son of the Wolf?
Son of the Wolf's hard to beat. That bursts on the scene with a blare of trumpets.
Yes,
it's hard to beat. The white silence in a far country, to the man on the trail. It's hard because it's just so new. It's just so new, this whole genre.
Right.
I think that gets the nod. If you got to read one anthology, read that, and then you can if you haven't read Jack London before, you can discover Jack London as his public in 1900 first discovered him. So there can be a certain historical empathy you can bring to it, how the American public was so impressed by this guy.
Right. Okay, so you would say Son of the Wolf is his best anthology, and is this his second best, or do you not want to rank the other three?
No, this is a close runner-up. Yeah. Again, he's more a mature writer here. he brings the delicacy with the power, particularly in this last one, the story of Jisoo. That's a very delicately told tale, especially with the ending there.
He does end with a bang.
But delicately.
A delicate bang. A
A
delicate
delicate
bang.
little bag, yeah.
All right.
No, they're
Kevin.
all. That's it. That's it. No, I. Those are my two. Those are my two favorite. Yeah, the Son of the Wolf and the Faith of Men.
Okay,
The first
great.
and the last of
But the
major
other ones have
trilogies.
many. The other two have much to recommend them. If you're able to read all of the Klondike stories out there,
There's even there's a whole lot more. I mean, they're not included in these 4 anthologies that we have chosen to analyze.
you mean there's more Klondike stories or more short stories?
Of course. Love of
Okay.
Life, To Build a Fire. These are not included here.
Oh, I forgot about To Build a Fire, if it was in here or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are a few others that.
Oh, there's more than a few. There's a lot. But these are the first ones he came out with. We wanted to approach this as the young Jack London with these beautiful, stories of the Klondike coming on the scene as in his early to mid 20s and just blowing people away with this prose and these thematics. So,
all right, Kev. Well, you gave us a wonderful survey of all 4 anthologies these 4 weeks. We really appreciate your input and feedback and your insightfulness. And so next week, we will not be doing the Hawaiian stories. You have to get the book and read it, and you're busy with your own stuff, your own book.
Yeah,
right.
right.
But you did suggest.
So Jack, if you're listening, excuse me, we can't do your South Sea Tales, but it's in the cause of my own literature, so you can understand that.
We'll get to the Hawaii stories at another time. You did say you'd like to mention or have a session on just the life of Jack London, which we'll do next week.
Because that'll be the most fun, and we don't have to stop and look for passages and bore the public with our sites. We just talk about a free flowing discussion, and I think that's going to be the most fun for me. Actually, I love the guy's life.
Okay, we'll do that next week. Thanks, Kevin. We'll see you then.
Okay, see you then.
Bye-bye.